This month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by Allison Cook, Super Inframan, and Stephen St. George. If you would like to help support the show, become a patron. WhereDidTheRoadGo.com. It's only $3 a month. Lots of extra content all month long. And now, our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight I have with me Mr. Octavion Graves.
How you doing?
And you've already had me on your podcast, which is Strange Dominions.
Yes.
And it's how long have you been doing that?
January 10th was the first episode. It was accidental. I didn't mean to upload it then, but I did, and I was like, all right, whatever. I'll just do it from now on.
Okay. Were you going to do a bunch of them and then start putting them up?
Yeah, exactly. Because I had like 3 recorded, and I was like, I should probably have like 5 recorded and edited before I start, so that way I'm not scrambling for time each week.
Right. So are you doing it week to week?
Yeah, every week.
Okay. That's brave.
Yeah, well, I have the time. My job is very, very like open, and so I'm like I'm a security guard, but I work in the neighborhood I live in, and so it just makes it a lot easier. Yeah,
I guess so. Kind of like working from home.
Exactly. I'm basically on call.
Okay. So where'd the name come from, Strange Dominions?
I had a couple different ideas for names. I am like obsessed with Lovecraft, and so originally it was going to be like Eldritch Dominions, but I felt like it didn't kind of come off the tongue as well. And I love strange familiars, and so I'm like, maybe I could, jump on the strange train. And I talked to Tim about it. He's like, yeah, go ahead. And so I'm like, yeah, I mean, we're close enough in subject matter that I think it works. So yeah, it just came out that way.
Nice. Yeah, I met you down at Albatwitch this last year, briefly. Yeah. I think I got there shortly before you had to leave.
Yeah, because I actually had to go to clock into work.
But I forgot what I was just going to say about the podcast. So how many episodes do you have now?
We just put out number 15 today. Okay. Or no, yesterday.
And the focus is kind of similar to stuff we do on this show.
Yeah, it's basically like if Where Did the Road Go is the question of consciousness in the paranormal, and Strange Familiars is folklore in the paranormal, then Strange Dominions is the occult in the paranormal.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's something I got into very early on without, pre-internet. I started realizing that my occult experiences kind of lined up with, some of the stuff like Whitley Strieber was experiencing. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like, wait, has anyone ever made this connection before? Because it wasn't in any of the books I read. Like I said, there was no internet to look it up on. So, and obviously some people did make the connection, but not in a way that was particularly meaningful or got out there.
Right. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, there's still, for some reason, a lot of fear around the occult, and especially in the paranormal circles that I've run into, they'll talk about anything, but the second you talk about, the occult or esoteric, there's like a weird feeling that comes over the room. I don't know how to explain it.
Well, I think it's that built-in sort of like for decades, at very least, we've been told the occult is bad and evil.
Right.
When really all it means is secret.
Exactly. There's a lot of things that are occult that people don't even realize that they're engaged in.
Exactly. But it's just that stigma that comes from the satanic panic and all that type of stuff, all the fear stuff that was pushed heavily in the 80s about, Satanism and the occult and witchcraft and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, the Warrens didn't help.
No, the Warrens definitely didn't help.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, you'll see those like memes go around like, oh, if these things are, if you're experiencing these things, these are demons and occult. And, and it's like, no, that's not a thing.
Well, yeah, especially in the early, like early and mid 2000s when the ghost shows were really popular.
Yeah.
Everything was demons. And now with like, I guess TikTok and a bunch of other internet areas, skinwalkers are like the new catch-all.
Are they really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, everything is skinwalkers. Bigfoot's a skinwalker. Dogman's absolutely a skinwalker to these people. Like, yeah. It always has to be one thing. It can't just be a conglomerate of multiple different things.
No, of course not. There's clearly only one thing happening.
Yeah, exactly.
And then that's the problem with looking for that universal sort of theory of everything, that you're never going to find it because it's not one thing happening. You have,
right.
There are things that may look similar, but just because they look similar, it's like, and I've used this example before, like you're watching a movie and you realize or you learn that, oh, he's not really punching that guy. So then you assume that all punches are fake.
Right.
And it's
That's kind of how I felt about wrestling for a long time.
Right. Exactly. It's like they look exactly the same most of the time, but they're two different things.
And there's things that have like, similarities, but like correspondences with each other, and people see that and they think, oh, okay, it's everything's just this one thing. And like you said, if it can be similar while being independent.
Yes. And also when you throw out things like skinwalkers, there's a very specific idea of what a skinwalker is. And then, like people also like to throw the Djinn out there, and it's like, okay,
oh, yeah.
But the Djinn, Fae, aliens, they're all different names potentially for a similar phenomena, but it still doesn't actually tell us what that phenomena is.
Exactly.
Like it's just different labels.
Yeah, and I mean, if you could say maybe it's one phenomena that takes different shapes, but when it takes that shape, it becomes an independent entity as opposed to the other shapes it takes. There's a lot of different avenues to go down, but just saying everything is one thing, it doesn't really hit the mark.
Yeah. And plus, a lot of stuff is going to be prosaic, so you have to kind of weed that out too.
Oh, absolutely.
Most people do know the difference between, say, seeing a bear in the woods and a Bigfoot, but there are probably some people who have not been around, the wilderness or something, who might mistake a bear for Bigfoot.
Yeah, I mean, with how we've kind of just delved so heavily into society and, this kind of fear of rural areas, there's a lot of people who've never actually seen a bear in person.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that definitely does happen. But I think when a hunter says, like, I've been around bears all my life, I know that bears don't have hands.
Right.
I believe that guy.
And then you have, there are weird videos you can find on the internet where, and I forget what causes it. It's some kind of brain disease where deer will walk upright.
That's a brain disease? I've heard about this whole, not deer thing, but I didn't know that came from a illness. Yeah, there's an illness. I forget what it is. But it affects them, and that's one of the behaviors they will show. Like someone had a video on Reddit of this deer walking around their cabin, and people are like, do not engage that. It's sick. Okay. That's good to know. I had no idea about that.
I'll look it up real quick here while we're talking to see if I can find the explanation for it. And of course, deer can sometimes just walk on their back legs anyway.
Right. I think that's a dominance thing.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's just talking about them. There's all kinds of videos of it. And I think if you're not familiar with animals and you see that, that's going to freak you out.
Well, have you ever heard a deer male call?
I don't know. Maybe.
Oh, it's terrifying. It's really, really deep. It just sounds very primal. And a lot of people don't know that deer make noises. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, let alone that. I don't know if it's during their rutting season, they're very vocal, but you can just look up deer grunt or deer growl and something will come up. I do think I've heard that. I don't think I've heard it in person. I think the most ones done to me in person is hiss at me. Okay. I've always had very peaceful interactions with deer. Even when I see there was a time when I was I think I was at work, and I work in a very forested area, and there was a buck, a pretty big buck in the road, and I was in a golf cart, and it came up pretty close to me. It didn't touch me or anything, but yeah, I've always had pretty peaceful encounters with deer, luckily.
Yeah, this wasn't so much not peaceful. It was very strange, actually, because I had walked way back behind my house into the field. It was pitch black, and I had drawn a circle and was doing a ritual. And at the end, I wasn't being quiet. I mean, I was in the middle of nowhere. And as soon as I got done and broke the circle, I suddenly heard this hiss from just a few feet away from me. And I jumped and grabbed the flashlight I had on the ground to the one side, and I turned on the flashlight, and there's this small deer, not like a fawn, but like a smaller deer, just kind of staring at me. And I'm like, "Did you not hear me? Like, that's really weird."
Yeah, I had a very strange occurrence when I did a very, very impromptu. I would consider it like a chaos ritual to Hecate on Saturday night because it was a full moon. And I didn't have a circle or anything like that. I just had like 3 candles and a censer of incense like in front of it. And while I was like saying it out loud, because I didn't have it written down or anything like that, it was just whatever I was feeling about it, I just said out loud.
Right.
And it sounded like, I mean, it could have been a deer. I didn't see anything, but it sounded like bipedal footsteps just walking around in front of me in the wood line. I couldn't see it. It was like the area that I was doing it on was on a ridge, and there's a big pivot down like on a hill. And I heard it, and I didn't stop. I just kept talking. I just noticed it. And the second I stopped talking, it stopped. I didn't hear it walk away. I didn't hear it get any quieter. It just stopped.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I waited for like 20 minutes because I was packing up my stuff because I had a whole bunch of stuff for offerings and things like that. Didn't hear it walk away or anything like that. Could have totally been a natural animal. It was just very weird timing.
Yeah. And that's how I felt about this. Like, I'm pretty sure that was an actual deer. I mean, maybe not, but like it seemed like a real deer. It's just, why didn't it hear me prior to me breaking the circle?
Right.
Because it had gotten pretty close to me by the time it hissed at me. And of course, I'm in pitch darkness. I have no idea what just hissed at me. And it ran a short distance away before stopping. So I hear a hiss and then foot, like, and I'm like, oh crap,
Mm-hmm.
But most encounters with deer have been with my car, honestly. That's how most encounters with deer have happened, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same. Deer, I was coming back from actually a Bigfoot like expedition, and I was coming home, and this buck just came running out like out of nowhere and destroyed my 96 Honda, which I was very upset about because I loved that car.
Yeah. Wow. They definitely do damage, to say the least.
Oh, absolutely.
When we were filming Gateways to Magonia, off in the field to the left, in the beginning segment where Joe's walking down the road in the dark, there was a whole herd of deer just stampeding around, and we're like, are they going to stay over there? He's like, I don't want to get run over by deer. And I'm like, yeah, well, if you do, it's on video at least. He's like, true, but I'd like not to be.
Oh, yeah. Those things can really, really mess you up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Between like a deer and its mate or something like that.
But there were a bunch of them, and you could just hear them. There's just that as they're running along the field, and it's like, why do they keep running back and forth?
Yeah, there's a field in my grandparents' neighborhood, and like at night, all the deer in the area will just go and congregate there, and you have to drive it by like 5 miles an hour, and the second you make this turn, it's just eyes for this, like just tons and tons of eyes in this one central location, and it's kind of spooky until you actually see what they are.
I guess it would be. So you've had a bunch of personal experiences, or at least a handful, and then some other weirdness.
Yeah.
You want to get into those? Like where were you always interested in this stuff?
Oh, absolutely. I had a very weird childhood. My grandmother was an astrologer starting in like the late 60s. And so she has 2 books on it. Like they called her the astrologer's astrologer. And so she was always into weird stuff. And so like I remember being 3 or 4 years old, and instead of like kids stories that she would read to me going to bed, she would read to me Edward Gorey, and he had a lot of very like morbid and esoteric stories and drawings. And so like I grew up on that, and that was really influential. And she used to make up ghost stories. It was really cool because I thought they were real. I thought she got them from somewhere. And I talked to her like a few years ago. I'm like, where did you get those ghost stories? And she's like, oh, I just made them up. just like, years and years of hearing other people's stories, I just kind of came up with it on my own. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that was very effective. So yeah, it's been with me for a very long time.
Nice. Well, I guess get into some of the personal experiences you had.
Okay, so I'm very much one of those kind of people that I don't have any psychic abilities. I didn't grow up with spirits or anything like that. If there was anything paranormal around, I had to kind of go out and look for it. So the weirdest thing that I can say happened to me, like in the beginning, was when I was 15. I was very big into like Delta blues, like Robert Johnson and guys like that, and my dad was too. And so we took a trip.
What's Delta Blue?
Oh, Delta blues, like old acoustic Delta blues.
Oh, blues. Okay.
Yeah, like Robert Johnson and Muddy Waters.
I thought you said Delta Blue, and I thought I was missing something.
No, yeah, like the blues, like,
Yeah,
guitar,
no, I totally got you. All right.
Yeah, so we flew from where I live in Maryland to Memphis, Tennessee, and we were going to rent a car and drive down to New Orleans and do this. It's Route 61. It's like the blues highway in the South. And so when we were in Memphis, we stayed near Beale Street, and that's kind of like the blues area and also jazz. But because I've been into the paranormal for my entire life, my dad was like, all right, well, you should probably find some like stuff to do. And so I found a ghost tour. And the majority of the tour was pretty lame. Like we started in the alleyway of a building, and the guy was like, sometimes people see orbs here. Take some pictures, and you might see some orbs. And then we went to the front of a apartment building, and the guy was like, in this room right here, people say they hear a woman screaming and see her in the window. And then I think there was a theater, and there was a little kid at the theater. But then the last stop of it was a bar that used to be a whorehouse back in like the 20s. And when these people bought it, it used to be like abandoned. It looked abandoned, and I guess they brought it up to code to the very minimum. So like the paint on the walls were still peeling, and it looked very degraded, and it had a cool atmosphere to it. So we're all hanging out, and the tour guide starts the tour, like that building tour, and we're on there's a staircase going up to the top floor, and we're at the bottom of the staircase, and he's telling us stories about, I think it was actually a woman at this point. They switched off, and she's telling us stories, and one of the women in the group had a little girl, and she had the girl go up on the stairs and so she could take a picture of her. In the picture, when she pulled the camera back from her face, there was another little girl with a different clothing and different hairstyle standing next to her daughter. Oh. And so people were kind of freaking out about that, and that was pretty cool. And then while we were upstairs, a lot of people were walking around with phones trying to get something recorded. And I'm kind of a solitary guy anyway, so I wanted to wait for everybody to leave. And so everyone did left, but the bar was still open. So I told my dad, like, hey, just like hang out for a bit, and I'm going to do some investigation on my own. And so I'm walking in this room, and I have my phone, and I just say, like, if there's anyone here who wants to talk to me, just talk into my little phone here. And I didn't hear anything with my own ears, but when we went outside and I played it back, you could hear a little girl respond to me and say, I will. And so that was pretty weird.
Yeah, that's interesting, especially that you got the little girl's voice after getting the picture.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting correlation. I mean, it was 2 a.m. Like, yeah, maybe there was a little girl outside and heard me, but I didn't hear it with my own ears.
Yeah, it seems unlikely.
Yeah, it was just a very weird experience. And I remember going back to the hotel room and feeling very guilty because I was like, oh man, this little girl hasn't talked to anyone in like 80 years and I didn't respond. She's probably so sad.
I guess that's a way to look at it.
Yeah, trying to think. So after that, I didn't really have much going on. And then the autumn of 2019, I believe, I had just turned 24. And I had been into Bigfoot my entire life, but I felt like I needed to go out and like look for it. And so I was trying to find groups to go looking for it with me. And I found a group of guys. It's strange because they're very flesh and blood, but they give credence to a lot of the Native American ideas that take it into a more woo area. But for the most part, they were flesh and blood. But they would say stuff like, Bigfoot knows that you're coming before you even get there and stuff like that. And that always was like, oh, okay, that doesn't sound very flesh and blood to me. But anyway, so I went out with these guys for a while and nothing really happened with them. But this other guy in one of the Facebook groups that I had met these other guys in said like, hey, I have a lot of stuff happening on my property. I don't really know what to do about it. I've been screamed at multiple times. If anyone wants to come and hang out with me and kind of see what's going on, I'm game for it. And so a buddy of mine were like, okay, well, yeah, we'll go out there. It's only like 2 hours away from us. So we went out there and it was raining like really bad. And this is like right before the pandemic started. Nothing really happened that time except for we were walking back to the car and we see what looks like, have you ever been driving on a road and it's raining and you're at like a stoplight and the stoplight is reflecting through the water droplet? You know what that looks like?
I think I know what you're talking about.
Okay, so that's what it looked like way off in the distance, and it was like an orangey red color. And so the guy that we were with was like, there's nothing over there. That is pure forest for a while. And he thought maybe it was poachers, but it just kind of stayed still for a while, went to the left, went to the right, and then just blinked out. And we were like, okay, I don't know what. I mean, I've heard about the lights because this time I'd already been listening to Strange Familiars and Sasquatch Chronicles, and they're always talking about lights.
Yeah.
And so I went out with that guy by myself like a week or so later, and when we got there and we set up camp, it was, I think, May, actually. Yeah, it was May. So you'd think that there'd be life in the woods. Animals would be making noise. There'd be bugs, stuff like that.
Sure.
The entire time we were there, not a sound, no wind. I mean, it was dead quiet. And so he and I were talking about ways to get activity going. And so he starts playing sounds of a baby crying, because that seems to be something that people like think Bigfoot likes, and I'm sure it is, but I don't know why. And we got one knock, and that was it. That was the only thing that happened, and I was terrified the rest of the night. I was just like looking out into the wood line, like, okay, it's gonna come get us. I know it. I know it's gonna come out there when we least expect it. So I can't go to sleep. I ended up going to sleep, but yeah, and then trying to think.
So is that it? Is that the end of that?
Yeah, that was the end of that.
Why did it terrify you so much?
Because I don't think I had ever been in the woods and heard something I couldn't explain right away. That was the first time that I had ever actually like heard something that I was like, okay, I don't know what that was.
Okay.
And it was just my first experience, and it was just it was like the Oz effect, except for I don't know if time slowed down, but it was just a weird feeling. Well, and I don't think terrified was the right word. It was just, I was on edge. I'll put it that way.
Right. Freaked out.
Yeah. And because nothing was happening, somehow that freaked me out more. I don't know how to explain that.
Well, I would think that would be the tension. Like you expect something else to happen and nothing else happens. So you're like, when is it coming?
Yeah, exactly. I went out with a friend of mine a couple more times to an area that is pretty well known within the Maryland Bigfoot community. It's kind of hard to get into because it's like it's a public ground, but it's owned by the state. But we had found a way in there at night, and we were at this like swampy area part of it. And this is kind of an embarrassing story, but I'll tell it anyway. We and this is just a little like side note to anyone who's going out looking for Bigfoot. If you hear weird stuff, go back again and like identify everything before you start thinking it's Bigfoot. We're sitting on this log by the water and nothing's happening. And then we start hearing what sounds like something throwing a very big rock into the water. And so I'm like on alert, and my buddy said, well, let's just wait and see if it happens again. It happens 2 more times. And he was in the military for a long time, and he doesn't normally get freaked out. He was like, okay, let's go. I went back with the guy that I heard the knock with, and he was like, are you sure it wasn't a beaver slapping its tail? I'm like, I didn't really even think about that. So we go back, it starts happening again. He shines a light over there, and there's beavers like, slapping their tails in the water.
Of course.
Yeah, but a week or so later after that, I went with my buddy and one of the Flesh and Blood guys to another area of that same park. And we're walking around, and I see stick structures, and that's what we were there for, because the guys that I kind of started this with, started going out with, were really into stick structures. So we start seeing these crazy stick structures, like very ornate, and I really don't think they were made by people.
Why?
While we were, it was just like the size of the logs were massive.
Okay.
It was just very, very extra. I don't know how else to put it. It was just extraordinary. While we were looking at these structures, my buddy was like, there's probably stuff like deeper in. So we go down this one direction, and we start hearing, the only way I can describe it is, think of a 500-pound owl coughing. It would hoot, and there was like 4 of them, and they would cough. I don't know how to explain that. It was like, hoo, hoo, and we were like, well, first of all, owls don't cough, and I don't usually hear more than one during the day. So that was weird. And later that night, we were still there, and we were leaving, and it was kind of funny because one of the Flesh and Blood guys, we were like, I think it's time to go. And he was like, no, we should stay. And then right as he said that, we hear something scream. And I know what foxes sound like. I know what coyotes sound like. It wasn't that. It was just a very, very loud, high-pitched scream. Yeah, so that was weird. And
you had to say the least.
Yeah. The next thing that happened was right before we started the podcast. The area that Tim calls Gazoo's Woods is about an hour and 15 minutes away from me. So I had been there twice before, and I was like, we should probably go up there at night and just see what happens. Actually, you know what? I'm completely missing the order of this. So I had gone up there by myself during the day, and there's one trail that like goes pretty far back into the woods, and then it ends up in like a neighborhood, but you have to, like, the trail ends and then you walk through the grass and then there's a neighborhood. But I had never made it to the end of this trail, and I'm walking down this trail, and all of a sudden there's like a voice in my head. It's my voice, but it's saying, you can go forward or you can leave, but if you go forward, you're not going to be ready for what you see. The second that happens, I hear what sounds like 3 or 2 wood knocks to my right, and then someone imitating a bird whistle. It starts behind me and then kind of rotates around me. It's weird to describe, and it goes up in like do-doot, 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 and I'm like, I don't know any bird that makes that noise, and it doesn't sound like it sounds like someone imitating a bird very badly. And then a bunch of crows fly out of this tree to my left and scare the crap out of me. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go. And while I'm walking back, I get grunted at by something. And the area that this is, it's very small. I don't even know how many square feet it is, but it's surrounded by houses. The biggest thing that is known to be in there is deer, and it wasn't a deer grunt. Huh. So that kind of spooked me, and I told Tim about it, and we had made plans to go up there together so I could show him. But before that happened, I took my friend Alden, who's sometimes my co-host, up there one night, and we walked past the area that I had my little encounter, and nothing happened. But we were walking back, and we feel like there's something walking next to us, and we can hear it. And this is probably September. So yeah, there's leaves on the ground, but when we would shine our flashlight, there was nothing there, and it sounded really, really close. I don't think it was a squirrel. It sounded very bipedal, and it would stop when we stopped, but later. Like, we would walk, we would hear it walking, and then we would stop, and then it would stop, like, after we stopped. So we just left after that. And then my episode with Tim on Strange Familiars, where I took him up to the area where I had my little weird sound occurrence, and then we start getting followed by tapping noises. And they happened all around us. They happened all day from the minute we get to. It was interesting because it started when we got to where my little encounters happened. And then it just continued the rest of the day. That's like pretty much all of my weird occurrences. In those same woods, I had shown Tim what we call a triple tree, which is, 3 trunks on one stump. And I was going to use that as an offering spot. And so I hadn't done it yet. And I was telling Tim about it. And he was like, oh, well, show me. So I show him where it is. And I show him the tree I was going to use. And he ties a little iron bell to one of the branches of the tree. And just to see if anything happened. And so I go back probably a month after that. And the tree, and it's the only tree that was affected. The tree that I was going to use as an offering spot with the bell on it was destroyed. I mean, it was split open. One tree was turned into an arch. The other one just was ripped out of the stump and thrown on the ground. It was just super weird. And so like Tim came up, he looked at it. He didn't know what was going on. It was a pretty spooky moment.
Why did he put the bell on the tree?
He's done it on a couple occasions in some of the areas that he goes to. I think it's an attempt to, he puts the bell on the tree and then he walks away and then he hears it. I think that's what he's hoping to happen.
Okay.
Yeah. I know that he's done it at Michaud a couple times.
And in this case, you didn't hear it.
No. But I go back a month later and that entire tree is destroyed. I can actually send you pictures because it's pretty weird. The other weird thing is the one tree that, like the one trunk that did not get affected, the string that the bell was tied onto was like twine, like a brown twine. And so the way that I knew that the tree, like which tree it was that I was going to use, was because that one trunk had a string on it. And so I sent a picture of it to Tim and he was like, that's not the string I left. And it's like a shoelace.
Huh.
But the string he left was twine.
Okay, that's really bizarre.
Yeah. And it's very well tied, too.
Huh. I don't even know what to make of that.
Yeah, I know.
That falls into the very subtle high strangeness category. Because
if anyone who hasn't heard that episode, you should definitely listen to it because he saw some stuff, too, that I didn't see.
Which episode was it? Do you know?
293 or 294. It's in the 290s, I'm pretty sure.
Do you know what it was called?
Yes, because I told them to name it this. The Evocation of Gazoo, because we were talking about ceremonial magic and the occult and how it relates to the paranormal most of the time we were there.
All right, cool. So did anything else happen with that?
No. I've been up there twice since all that happened to check on my offering spot, which is in the same area but a different tree, and it hasn't been touched or anything like that, which I'm disappointed by, but I've been meaning to go up there in the next few days and see if anything's been disturbed.
Okay. I'm just looking to see. Okay, so it was 291, Evocation of Gazoo.
Yeah.
I have not listened to that one yet.
Oh, it's a good one.
Sounds like it. So that's your most recent experience then?
Yeah.
And you said there are some experiences like people seeing you where you weren't?
What they would see was a shadow person because they were in sleep paralysis, but they identified it as me.
Do you know why?
No, I just know that my ex-girlfriend, she one night woke me up out of a dead sleep. She like hit me and she was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm sleeping. What are you talking about?" And she was like, "No, you were just standing at the doorway staring at me and I couldn't move." I'm like, "No, I was not. I promise you." And she was like, "Okay, well, there was a shadow thing and it was you." I'm like, "What do you mean it was me? Did it look like me?" I'm like, "No, it was you." You know how like when you just know who someone is, like instinctually, it was you. In that same apartment, my mother said the same thing. She said one night she woke up, couldn't move, and she saw a shadow person in the doorway, and she just knew it was me. It wasn't me. I wasn't even home at the time. Then, and this actually happened all kind of within a few months of each other. A buddy of mine, Corey, who's actually been on my show, he calls me one day and was like, "Hey, I just woke up from a nap and something weird happened." I'm like, "What?" He said, "I woke up, but I couldn't move, and a shadow person was sitting on the end of my bed, and it was you. Like, I thought it was you, and I kept saying your name, but it wasn't responding." I'm like, "Why did you think it was me?" And he was like, "I don't know. You're just weird and shadowy, so it seemed like something you would do." I'm like, "Oh, well, thanks."
You're weird and shadowy.
Yeah, well, it's funny because a lot of people get mad at me because I walk very quietly. And so it's funny. I shouldn't laugh because my girlfriend gets so mad at me about it. But like, I'll walk into our room and she'll be doing something and I'll just be like, "Hi," and it'll scare the hell out of her.
No, that's
and she's
funny.
Like, "Love it." I'm like, "I don't mean to, but yeah, I do love it. It's hilarious."
Huh. So you're kind of shadowy then. You're silent.
Yeah, I'm the specter.
Anything else like that happen?
Not yet. I have a feeling that my experiences are going to ramp up the more I do the show, because there's been a lot of strange synchronicities, not really surrounding the show, but I feel are sourced from things that we've talked about on the show.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's nothing really notable. It's just a lot of like, I'm hesitant to talk about it, especially because it's still a kind of like an ongoing thing.
Right.
I can just say that the Hecate roundtable that you did was very, very creepy when you posted it, due to things that I had experienced that day.
Ah, right. Yeah, she told me about that, or at least part of it.
Yeah, it was it was a big synchronicity in the middle of a sea of very strange pointed synchronicities.
So what does Hecate mean to you?
I don't know. I'm completely unfamiliar and unaffiliated with her because for the longest time, I've been focused on the Norse pagan path. Like, that's been my thing since I was a little kid. I've known about Hecate, but it didn't really mean anything to me until like 2 weeks ago.
Huh. Interesting.
But I have been, the one thing that I will say is the journey, the show is probably unlike a lot of podcasts because, like I said, I don't have that many experiences of my own. I'm not a practicing magician because I'm an occultist, but I hesitate to call myself a magician because I'm taking a course in like traditional Solomonic magic at the moment. And so the show is my journey, right? So people are following along with me. When I have a guest on and I'm asking them questions, it's not because I know the answer to the question and I just want content. It's because I genuinely don't know and I want them to tell me, and I want to share it with people who are like me.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And that's how I started doing my show. It's like, I want to talk to these people. I want to ask them these questions.
Yeah.
So what has been like some of the stuff you've learned from doing the show so far?
I've always been an animist, but it has pushed me more into that camp.
Okay.
I've always, like, within the last like 6 or 7 years, I completely moved away or abandoned the flesh and blood hypothesis. And the thing that actually got me thinking in the woo terms or the incorporeal cryptid terms is 2013. I'm on the internet just hanging out, looking at stuff. And when I would get bored, I would just look up like, oh, is there any new Bigfoot videos? There wasn't a Bigfoot video, but there was an article about a woman who said that she was abducted by Bigfoot and they didn't hurt her. They fed her, and that they're interdimensional beings, that they exist simultaneously in our dimension and then another dimension. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if she's just making it up, but the idea of that I had never heard that idea until then. Right. And I start looking into it, and I don't know if Bigfoot is interdimensional, but I don't think it's a big hairy ape.
Right. I still go with the idea that there could be an undiscovered ape out there in certain regions.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a lot of different things going on with the Bigfoot phenomena, and one of them may be a flesh and blood creature roaming around certain areas, but I don't think that is the whole of it.
Yeah, and I think those are the rarest sightings. If I were gonna mark it down like that, I would say that the real flesh and blood Bigfoots are very, very rarely experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. And the things that I've learned from the show is that it definitely feels like there are entities within the paranormal that if you can communicate with it in a certain way, there may be some knowledge there. There may be information that it is trying to share with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what I've been trying to do is see if there's any kind of occult or magical techniques one could use to interact with the paranormal to kind of do it on like an even keel, like a mutually beneficial way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I think when people experience weird stuff, whether it be cryptids or ghosts, and I make a distinction between ghost and spirit, like I'm sure there are souls of dead people that are still roaming around, but I don't think that makes up a very large majority of what people experience when they see like a ghost. I think it's a spirit. And when I say spirit, I mean just an entity that has always existed without flesh, without a body. It just exists in the incorporeal. But I feel like when people experience this stuff, and it may be their own perception, or it may be an inadvertent way that the entities come at, interact with you, it scares them. And it makes them see these things as evil or negative in some way.
Sure.
And I don't really see it that way. I see them as kind of objective beings, and our perception colors how they feel to us. But I think if you can get away from that and communicate with these things in some way, there may be information that they can share with you that can better your, that can allow you to access different parts of our reality. One of the guys that I had on my show, Kane Del Sol, he's actually a good friend of mine. He plays in a band called Grave Gnosis.
Grave Gnosis.
Yeah, he created his entire magical system based on shadow people experiences that he had as a kid. Basically, he decided one day that he wasn't going to be afraid, and so he stayed up all night and waited for them to come, and they came, and he says that he communicated with them, and they showed him these other entities that he now works with on a magical basis.
Huh. I remember you telling me a little bit about that. For some reason, Grave Gnosis, just the band name, showed up in my dream one day.
Really?
And I think they were I don't remember if I even liked them on Facebook. I know I'd heard of them. And so I had this dream, and it's like Grave Gnosis. I'm like, who's Grave Gnosis? And I went and looked on Facebook. I'm like, do I have anything by them? No, I don't have anything by them. They're a real band. They're out of Florida, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, I wonder why they popped into my head.
Yeah, I mean, they're a great band. Their new album, Lux Negretto, is really, really good. If you like just dark, somewhat symphonic, a little melodic, but esoteric black metal, I highly recommend it.
I know I listened to some of it, but I never contacted them for anything.
Okay. Well,
it was kind of on my to-do list, and then I forgot about it.
Okay. Well, I'll let him know that you would like to talk to him, because I'm sure he would love to talk to you.
Yeah, that would be interesting. But people can hear it. What show is that of yours?
Episode 9.
9. Okay, excellent. I was going to say something else. So, but you said you had been following the Norse sort of traditions.
Yeah, because I'm a mutt. I come from a lot of different lineages, but the one that has always kind of resonated the most with me is my Norse stuff. So the way that kind of exists is my grandmother's father is from a place called the Isle of Man. Okay. And the Isle of Man was founded by, settled and conquered by Vikings and Celts. And if your name starts with a certain letter, then you're either a Viking, a Norse or a Celt. My Manx name is Corlett. In English, that roughly translates to Thor people. So that has been and I found out about that when I was probably 4 or 5. And so the rest of my life has been I'm a Viking, I'm a Norseman, I'm, all that stuff. And so that's been a really cool thing. And it's weird because I didn't really engage with it. I called myself that, and I would wear a Thor's hammer, but I didn't do offerings to deities or anything like that. That's somewhat of a new thing. And actually, that all kind of sounded silly to me. I don't know why, but there was this like hesitation I had about doing that, because when I would think about cryptids or the paranormal, when people go out, they get activity, right? Like they know that something is like answering them in real time. But when you talk about like gods and goddesses, like, yeah, you give offerings and maybe you'll see like a bird or, you know, just something that you kind of associate with that god, and you say like, oh, well, it's communicating with me. That always felt very wishy-washy for me.
Right.
I wanted a more definite real-time answer. And so, yeah, but I've lightened up on that a lot, especially with this Hecate stuff I've been dealing with. Some very strange stuff is occurring with that. And I'm going to do an episode on that with my show, and I can come on later when it's kind of more ironed out and I know what's going on.
Yeah. If you know what's going on.
Yeah. I do not know what's going on. It's a lot of weird stuff.
Yeah. No, I get that. I totally get that. And Hecate just keeps popping up all the time suddenly. That's why we did the roundtable on it, because it's like everyone seems to be having Hecate experiences.
Yeah, well, I didn't really, I mean, it has been, and I've noticed that, but it didn't really mean anything to me until a devotee of her popped up in a dream where, like, I was learning about Egyptian magic, which, if you know about the PGM, the Greek magical papyri, there are a couple spells and incantations to her. And so, I don't know, I talked to my teacher, and he was actually what I'll call my mentor. He's a friend of mine, and he's been on the show, episodes 7 and 8. Luke Bell, the ceremonial magician. He's actually going to be an occasional co-host on the show.
Cool.
But he was like, you know, that can be a sign that something wants to reach out to you. So you do some research and see what you can do to engage with it. And so that's kind of what I've been doing.
Okay. And you said you don't consider yourself a magician, but you do rituals and stuff.
Yeah, I'm learning to be a magician, but I just did my first like impromptu ritual on Saturday night with the full moon. So I'm very new to the actual practice of it. I've been into the theory and the aesthetics of it for a long time. One of the problems, and I've talked about this a couple of times on my show, when I was younger, like 13, 14, 15, I really wanted to become a practicing magician, but I didn't know where to start. And so I would go to like metal shows, black metal shows, death metal shows, and I would always see people wearing like pentagrams and occult imagery on them, and I would go up to some of them and be like, hey, you know, are you into like magic and stuff? And they'd say, yeah. I'm like, well, I would really like to get into it, but I don't know where to start. Can you like, you know, tell me where to go or help me out here? And they're like, well, if you don't know, I can't tell you. And I got really discouraged by that, and so I kind of gave up for a few years. And then I had a very mystical mushroom experience, which I know I talked to you about when you were on my show.
Yeah, well, tell people about it now.
Okay, so it's kind of a long story.
That's all right.
I've done mushrooms 5 times now. The last time, actually, we just passed the year anniversary. The last time I did it, April 6th. And it was mostly low doses, like maybe 1 gram, maybe 1.5, something like that. And then I got some, and my buddy was like, I'm going to take 4 grams. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm just going to stick to 2. But then I was like, he's like, do 2.5. Like, I want you to be somewhat on my level. I'm like, oh God. Okay, fine. And I was like really hesitant about it. And we did this almost like a ritual, because my patron saint, Terrence McKenna, would always talk about, like, you know, 8 hours, no food, sleep really well, get up early in the morning, do it early in the morning. And so we would just follow that advice. And we made this big steak dinner and everything the night before, and we woke up at 5 a.m. I actually woke up at 4 a.m. Not 4 a.m., but like really early, because I wanted to watch the sunrise. And so I went outside. I went down to the water, because the house I was living in was right next to the water, and I played like choir music. And I just watched the sunrise go up, and it was really beautiful. And like in my head, I was like, I'm going to have some weird prophetic experience today. Today is not going to be a normal day. And I was right, because the second I took them, I got very anxious. And it almost felt like I can't smoke weed. Every time I do, it just sends me into a straight panic attack. It felt like that. but not as bad. It was like a mild bad weed high. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, this isn't terrible, but this isn't what I signed up for. It got better throughout the time. Like, it was weird because we went to the woods outside my house, and we were laying in a field, like in the woods. And like, I closed my eyes and it just felt like I was there for years. And my buddy's doing the same thing. And we hear somebody say, hey, so we look up and there's a guy there in the woods. And he's like, are you guys on shrooms? And we looked at each other and we're like, yeah. He's like, oh, cool, man. I'd love to talk about it, but I got to go find my mom. And just walks away. And me and him were like, well, did that really happen? Was that the mushrooms? Like, that was really vivid. I don't know.
Wow.
And then, yeah, that was weird. And so the trip gets kind of bad and then better because we start singing to each other and oxygen. So that kind of invokes a like a peak. And we find it's like a seesaw for bicyclists. So it's like a big wooden log and it's on a hill, like a tilt. And so you go up it and then you go down and it's in the trail in the woods. And so my buddy, we're both running like top speed and he runs and jumps on it. And I do the same thing. And this is where it gets scary because I don't remember like jumping. I just remember being on in the air and then on my side, like in the fetal position on the ground. And I think what happened was I jumped and my foot got caught on the edge of the seesaw and I fell. And so the thought loops start happening. I'm like, oh God, I have a concussion. I'm hemorrhaging. My brain is bleeding. Then the very annoying auditory hallucinations start. Like everything gets really loud, but only one specific thing as I would walk by it. And then I would walk by another thing and that would get loud. And so that was weird. But at a certain point, my buddy was like, okay, you need to stop. You need to close your eyes and just chill. So I do that. While my eyes are closed, I have a closed-eyed hallucination of a very large python coming towards me. It's not moving. It's just making the motions like it's coming towards me. And I watch it for a while, and then I open my eyes, and I'm still having a bad trip. And so later on, I came out of it with the understanding of ego dissolution or an aspect of ego dissolution. And I come to the pretty standard realization that people get on mushrooms that, you know, nothing is real, but everything is real, but also nothing is itself. Everything is connected. It's all one thing living itself through other entities. And it's a very complicated, very difficult to explain thought process, but I had this catharsis. And so that entire experience kind of made me feel like, oh, I need to like start doing the things that I really want to do. Like I can't keep waiting. Like I've been waiting for someone to teach me magic. I've been waiting for different things to just happen to like signal to me that I could do it. And I was like, okay, I just need to do it. And so I had an interest in Norse paganism. So I start going to like meetups for Norse pagans and reading books and things like that. And so I realized like, oh, you know, I've always been into magic. I should probably like get into that. So I start reading books on that. And then the paranormal stuff. I'm like, okay, well, what can I do with that besides just going out? So I start going out more. And then I decide I'm going to start this podcast. But it was a while. I didn't start the podcast until like September of 2021. That's when I started recording it. But yeah, that mushroom trip kind of, well, it started about a 6-month long depression. And I mean, the worst depression I've ever had. I couldn't feel anything. And I would get really angry because I couldn't feel anything. Like I would want to go play music, but I couldn't care enough to do it. And I would get angry at myself. Like, why don't you care? And that eventually subsided. But yeah, that was a very long ramble. I apologize.
No, that's okay. That was, I mean, it sounds like the dark night of the soul type of experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And what brought you out of it?
Tool.
Okay.
I listened to Parabola and the lyrics just like I start singing the lyrics. Like I hadn't listened to that song in years and I just knew the lyrics really well. All of a sudden, like totally out of nowhere. And I start singing it. And then I'm looking at my friend and I'm singing the song, but using it as a, like I'm looking at him like I'm explaining to him what I'm feeling, but the words that are coming out of my mouth are what Maynard's saying in the song. And I just like, it just hit me really fast. Like, oh my God. Okay. So this is what reality is. This is nuts. Okay. And I calmed down after that.
Interesting. It's fascinating to me what music can do to you.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's like, I was on a podcast just recently. I don't think it's out by the time people will hear this. But we were talking about the way music can resonate with you and totally affect your state of mind and your mood and all that type of stuff. Because when I get depressed, I need the right music. And a lot of times it's depressing music that brings me out of it. It's not...
I'm the same way.
Yeah, it's not, energetic music because that doesn't resonate with how I'm feeling. I need something like old anathema or early Pyogenesis or something that's really dark and doomy. And then it kind of like clicks.
Catharsis?
Huh?
It's like catharsis.
Yeah.
Yeah, it resonates with you, and you're like, okay, it's okay to feel like this. Like, yeah. Well, I've never heard anyone talk about Pyogenesis before. That's one of my favorite bands.
I like only the first album and EP.
Yeah, is that the blue one?
No, that one's okay. That's the third release.
Okay. I found that band on a list of top 20 or top 50 doom metal riffs back in like 2008.
Yeah, they were the demos are really almost death metal with doom influences. And the first album, which is only 6 songs, but it's like 40 minutes long, I think, is doomy with the death metal, but it's not as death metal. And then they did the EP, which gets a little doomier and a little less death metal. And then the one you're talking about, something X-Ray Nothings, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, it's a more gothy sound.
Yes, it totally has a more gothic sound with some doom elements. It's a lot more melodic and catchy. And after that, they became a pop band.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not into that stuff.
And then they broke up and got back together, and now they do steampunk metal.
Okay.
Which is okay, weird. But it's not like the early stuff. But yeah, Pyogenesis is actually one of my go-tos when I'm depressed, because that first record, I don't know, it's so dark and it's so doomy, I mean,
have you ever heard the band Warning from the UK?
I think so.
Okay, it's I can't listen to that album unless I'm like very depressed. Like it's so it hits so hard to very, very specific feelings for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And to me, it's fascinating just how much music can affect us. It's literally hardwired into our brain.
Mm-hmm. It's the sound of life. It's you couldn't live without it, really.
And yet there are people who just don't care and don't listen to music.
I had a friend, actually the guy that I would go Bigfooting with, his stepdad doesn't listen to music. He only listens to sports radio. And I'm like, well, that does not compute for me at all.
Yeah, how do you do that? Is that Warning band have an album called Exile?
Maybe. No, the one that it's Watching from a Distance. That's the album that their big one.
I'll have to look it up. It's not in my catalog on my
it's
phone
not
anyway.
Going to click with you unless you're like on the floor crying. I should just cry.
But
otherwise it sounds really melodramatic.
And I mean, it's like, it's not just metal. I mean, all music, like people like what they like. A lot of times, if it deeply affects them, it's because it resonates with them in some way.
Oh, yeah.
And I find that I meditate very well to certain bands.
Yeah, meditation's it's hard for me, because when I got into magic, you ever notice how like the new age hates the new age? Like there's a lot of authors who are putting out new age ideas and saying like, oh, this idea is just a dumb new age idea. Don't listen to that. Listen to me. Like DJ Conway, when I didn't know who that was, I got her book Norse Magic. Oh, you know who DJ Conway is?
No.
Oh, she's a big wig. She's dead now, but she was very, very big in Wicca.
Oh, okay.
But she doesn't like come out as Wiccan. Like you have to read her books to find that out. And so I thought it was just a Norse pagan writing about Norse magic. And so I'm reading it, and the one part is like, love spells, like that's, don't do that. But then all this other new age stuff, like that's okay. But then, you're expecting her to talk about runes and stuff, and then she just starts talking about calling in the four quarters. I'm like, wait, that's not what I'm looking for here.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But yes, all these books have meditation in it, and so it's billed as all you have to do magic is meditate. And so I would do it, but nothing would happen. Like, and I still don't know if I'm doing meditation right. Like, I still can't tell if I'm actually clearing my mind or if I'm just not paying attention to the thoughts in my mind. I still do it, but very rarely. So yeah, meditation's a weird thing for me.
So I have found that a lot of times I follow where my mind goes when I'm not trying to push it somewhere. I mean, sometimes I'm looking for just like to clear my mind, but other times I'm literally looking for answers to things, and it's like, okay, so if I just let it go, where's it going to go?
Yeah.
And then other times I'll focus in on something that I'm trying to figure out. I think the weirdest time I did that, there was this girl I was friends with, and there was something about her I couldn't put my finger on, and so I started focusing on her when I was meditating. And every time I tried to, instead of getting information, I just got this white feather. And like, it was just this brilliant white feather the minute I tried to focus on her. And I'm like, okay, and I tried it again a different day, same thing. And I'm like, what the hell is it with the white feather? So the next time I saw her, I told her this, and she just kind of stopped and went, whoa. And I'm like, does that mean something? And I forget the exact details. I talked to her recently about it, actually, because it'll be in my book when I get it done. But like, some woman had told her, like some psychic or something had told her that when she finds the white feather, she'll know she's in the right place.
Okay. Yeah, I think have you ever told that story on the show before?
I might have told it, yeah.
Okay, because it sounds familiar.
And so like that, and then when I meditated on her, that stopped. It was almost like that had to be, I had to mention that to her. It was like important to say that to her type of thing.
I actually missed I haven't thought about, you triggered a memory for me because I haven't thought about this since it happened. I went to this area in Maryland called Catoctin Mountain, and it's actually part of the same mountain range that Michaud in Pennsylvania is part of. So I went up there, and I just wanted to go for a hike and see, if anything weird would happen. And it was during my meditation phase, and I go up there, and I have this problem where I can't keep my eyes closed for long periods of time. Like, my body just won't let me. So I have to wear like a sleep mask, basically. But I had forgotten my sleep mask. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to sit on this rock. I think it was some kind of like quartz. And I remember, because that's a big part of the missing 411 stuff. So I'm like, if I wanted something to happen, maybe I'll sit on this like quartz rock and meditate and see if anything happens. And so I meditated for about like 20 minutes. And what actually got me out of the meditation state was wood knock. That was the only thing that happened. But that was a strange little occurrence.
Huh. Okay. And I don't think meditation is magic. Meditation is just, it helps with, it helps you understand better what's going on inside. It helps, physically it's good for you.
Yeah. And like, it has its merits. Like, I still meditate, just not very often.
Right. And I've had trouble meditating ever since the first time I got COVID.
Okay.
Because it really messed up my ability to focus.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it was the first, I got it, as I'm sure I've said on here before lockdown, and for 6 to 8 weeks, it was messed me up bad. And it stayed after like the exhaustion and stuff. It's still never gotten back to normal. Mm-hmm. And of course, getting it again probably didn't help. But it's, my ability, I couldn't concentrate at all when I had it. Like, there was a 6-week period where reading was horrible. I couldn't focus on anything for more than a couple of pages. I had horrible headaches, and I was just struggling to get through books so I could have people on.
Okay, wow.
And then it messed, next time I tried to meditate, I'm like, wow, I really can't stay focused,
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never heard anyone because I had a friend who had COVID. I've never heard of that, but that is interesting.
And I think it's just connected to that lack of focus, which is much better now, but still nowhere near what it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what exactly it did to me in what way, but it definitely screwed something up.
I don't know.
I did find using binaural beats has some interesting effects.
Yeah, I've done that a couple times, and that's always been like what I consider my most successful meditations where I really do kind of just go off into my own world. The other thing that helps is I'm very into dark ambient. It's like one of my favorite genres.
Yeah.
There's a artist named Paleo Wolf, and he makes what he calls Neolithic ambient. And so it's kind of like, the band like Wardrunia and Heel Young?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it's like that, but really, really minimalist.
Okay.
Like there's no vocals in it. It's just mostly drum beats with some prehistoric sounding instruments.
Nice.
But I would listen to that when I would, and he makes like 10-hour mixes of his stuff on YouTube. And so I would listen to that. And I remember one time I just kind of went off into this own world where I was at a bonfire with other like Vikings, and I was just there. It was a very weird experience. The other thing that happened with that was the reason I came out of that meditation was I felt my arm being pulled. Now, I don't think it was something external pulling my arm. I think it was just a muscle spasm, but it's never happened before or after that. It was I've never talked about that. It's just a weird thing.
And this was where?
This is in my on my porch. That's where I used to meditate.
So not likely anything walked past and pulled your arm.
No.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what do you make of like magic in general now that you've delved into it a little bit? Like, what do you think it is that you're doing?
So there, in recent times, and I think this has been a long time, I think people conflate the terms magic and mysticism as the same thing, when I feel that they're two different sides of the same coin. So magic to me, that is basically trying to communicate with spirits to like create some sort of practical goal or practical result. Mysticism to me is the communication with spirits in order to understand the self. And it's basically one is external results and the other is internal results. So magic specifically, to me, that is kind of, either it's summoning spirits or invoking them or something like that to ask them or charge them with creating like a very practical result in your life.
Okay. I don't know. I liked Crowley's version of definition of magic, where he said that magic is the art of using your will to change reality.
Yeah, I definitely like that too. My interpretation of that is basically getting a spirit to do your will onto external reality. I think for me, mysticism, like intent and will play a larger part in mysticism, because like when I did my little Hecate ritual, I didn't have a script written. I didn't do research on how they did it in ancient times. I just like did whatever I wanted to do, and some weird stuff happened with it, but that was purely will and intent. Like I went out there with the intent of trying to appease a deity, basically, and I kind of got an answer. I'm going to go into that more detail when I've got some more stuff.
Yeah, that's
out.
fine.
And the thing that I think about the paranormal, especially nowadays, is it's an occult practice. Like going out looking for these things, it's an occult practice. And I think that mysticism is heavily involved, because I'm very wary, like when I go out looking for Bigfoot, right? I'm very wary of my intent in doing so. So like if the thought pops up into my head, I'm going to look for Bigfoot so I can get content for my show to share. I usually will just go home, honestly, because I feel like I've now ruined the experience, because whatever is out there, it probably heard that and was like, okay, well, we're not coming out now. When you go out there and just want to say, you feel like I want to have an experience for myself. Like I just want to know for my own curiosity what's going to happen. I feel like you're going to get a lot more activity that way. I just feel like this stuff, and I think this will kind of goes into the idea that we're never going to know what it is, because I don't think we're supposed to. I don't think that's its purpose. Yeah. I feel like it is a hidden thing, and its nature is to be hidden. I think all these people going out trying to get evidence to Bigfoot to show big man science, which isn't going to accept it anyway.
Right.
They're not. That's not going to happen, because that's not its nature.
I see. I always doubt the existence of external spirits. Like, I'm not saying they don't exist, but like I feel like I lean more toward this stuff coming from us than from external, even when it seems external.
I definitely respect that, and I agreed with it to a point. I think there's a part of me that just wants it to be external. Like,
sure.
I want it to be gods and goddesses and spirits and all that thing. But like at the end of the day, if it all turned out that it was all just from us, like a Seth kind of thing, I would be totally into that. I don't know. Are you familiar with Seth? Seriah?
Yeah, just a bit.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, that's actually what brought me out of that really severe depression I had with Seth.
Yeah, I know, because you've talked about that specific part of it before.
And completely changed my view on channeling when that opened me up to, okay, maybe at least this seems legitimate.
Yeah. I think you've said this, that not all channeling is right, but when it's right, it really is.
Yeah. I don't know if I said that very thing, but I would agree with it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's being, whatever it is being channeled through us. So it's also going, I think it has to do with if someone's genuinely channeling something, and B, that they are doing it in a clear way and they're not biasing. That's not a word. Pushing a bias on it.
Right. Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And I think that even if there's like external spirits that we're interacting with, you have to take into account your own perception and how it's coloring things, and how, and this is kind of comes from my psychedelic experiences. Reality doesn't look or feel or sound or, anything like we're experiencing it, right? Like,
yeah.
I think I was watching something, or I don't know, this really resonated with me. Someone was like, put your hand on a tree. Are you feeling that tree, or are you just picking up the sensation on your fingertips?
Right.
You've never felt that tree. You just know how it feels, but not the actual object itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're not technically touching the object. There's a space there.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I mean, reality's all vibrations.
Exactly. It's all, it's vibrations and frequency. That's how I've been able to not rationalize it, but that's one thing I keep falling back on, is like frequency is the objective reality.
Okay. That makes some sense. I guess my thing with external is that it's so hard to prove external stuff. You know what I mean? Like, people will get upset sometimes because they'll be like, well, if it's not external, then it's not real. It's like, but that means we're capable of so much more than we realize.
Oh yeah. I definitely think that our subconscious, I hesitate to say that it creates our reality, but I think it has a much bigger play in our reality than we give it credit for.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And and it is our subconscious or our unconscious. We don't know what's going on there. We don't have any direct communication with it.
Oh yeah. That's the thing that when I think that's one of my contentions with a lot of the new age magic stuff, is people think that they can just, create reality because they want to. And I don't think it worked like that. I think I don't think we have any control over it.
No. And that was one of the things that impressed me about Seth, is that, he's talking about, and he's not talking about magic, but he is, when he's talking about how the unconscious is a language of symbols, or the subconscious is a language of symbols. And that's the level from which we create reality, is from our subconscious. So if you're going to do something to try and change your reality, you can't do it with your conscious mind. You have to use symbols to communicate that to your subconscious mind.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that.
And I read that, and I just stopped him. I'm sorry, what did you say?
I just said symbology is super important, and I almost feel like it's almost more important than just like language. Yeah,
absolutely. And he, I read that chapter and I stopped him when he just explained lust for result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, God damn, I did not expect that. Okay. So whatever the source was, the information was so. It's kind of like Castanada's stuff. I mean, yeah, it seems like Castaneda was not who he said he was, didn't do the stuff he did, but he actually did research on shamanism and, kind of related in a fictional account that he claimed was real, but the stuff works.
I had a friend of mine on the show last night. It's going to be a Patreon show, and he does all the artwork for the show. So I don't know. I mean, you've seen the... Yeah, okay. So that's all him. He's the wizard. That's what he likes to go by. And the thing about him is he's by default a materialist, but he does DMT the way people smoke cigarettes. And so when I would talk to him about it, like I asked him last night, like, why is the DMT realm not an external thing? Like, do you think it's possible that it is an external place, but you have to go within yourself to find it or to get there? And he's like, nah, it's all hallucination. I'm like, okay, but what if you did DMT with like another person and you both share the exact same experience and you see each other in real time in the DMT world? What does that denote? And he's like, I don't know, but it's probably not a real place. I'm like, but there's definitely a dogma there. Like, there's definitely like I don't know what it is, but it's definitely not what you think it is.
Right.
But like, nothing you say is ever going to convince me. And it's just kind of hard to get through that wall.
Yes. And I don't think you can get through that wall.
No.
I stopped arguing with people like that a long time ago. Not because I didn't want them to understand, but it was clear that they didn't want to understand. So I was just wasting my time.
I've always really enjoyed your distinction between a skeptic and a debunker.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's very important to me.
Yeah, because I think, you should have a skeptic around that is willing to like listen to you, but still has that like very analytical mindset, but won't deny something if you're shoving it in his face.
Well, skeptics also ask questions. They don't set on a specific thing. They continue to ask questions. The whole idea of skepticism is not to settle on anything, but keep asking better questions. Whereas debunkers have already made up their mind.
Exactly. I think I told you about this on my show, but the Joe Rogan episode with Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson and the leader of the Skeptic Thinker Society, and how much of a train wreck that episode was, because Randall and Graham are just like giving him like really compelling evidence. And he's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like that was his response to like a bunch of different things. Like, I don't care. It's not real because I say it's not real.
Exactly. Well, we're almost out of time here. Do you have a website for the podcast or anything?
Yes, it's strangedominionspodcast.com.
Okay. Is there any other ways people should find you online?
Yeah, so we have an Instagram page, a YouTube page, a Facebook page. We're not on Twitter. And you can listen to it on the website or wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Music, all the other obscure ones. There's like one called Podfiend or Podfriend. I don't know what they're called. But yeah, if you get if it plays podcasts, we're on there.
I use Podcast Addict.
Okay, yeah, we're on there.
Yes, I know. I find that one to work the best for me of all the ones I've tried.
If you are interested in the paranormal and the occult and how the two things might coexist or connect to each other, then come on down to Strange Dominions.
All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
I would like to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons, because without you, this show would not be possible. I particularly want to give a special shout out to those of you pledging $10 or more. Leanne Sherry, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, Stephen St. George, CJ, Tim, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, Christine, a blue second-gen MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Patricia Giaquinta, Alex Whitcomb, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limina, Brendan William, Charles Davis, Bobby Bear, MJ Armstrong, Charles in Florida, land of the crazy and communicable, Chris Ernst, Craig Cicernos, Craig Parmenter, Crystal Ann Compton, Diane B., Duffy Dowder, Edu Camahort, Empty K, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, J. Otto Bullitt, James Lattimore, Joanna Rojas, John Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Kristen L., Laser Printer Jam, Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, Jim and Sophie, Mark Bowley, Mark Brady, Matt in Delaware, Patricia W., Paul Jeffries, Ray Benedetto, Riker and Stark, Roger Gonzalez, Sam Sharon, Stone Wilderness Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, 36 Dingo, Thunderboy, Timothy Castaneda, Tyler Glimstead, Vincent Trewell, Walker, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, Ren Collier, Stephen D., and Amber Hall. Thank you all so very much. There's a Patreon segment with Octavian as well, where we continue to talk about magic and its relation to the paranormal and such. So you can get that if you are a Patreon, and you can become a patron for only $3 a month at wheredidtheroadgo.com. So it helps us out immensely. You have no idea how much it helps keeping this show going. So thank you all who are already patrons. And if you want extra content on almost every show, plus some other stuff, $3 a month is all it is. And I will see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.